All right. So we're recording now for our week 3 lecture here in Pattern Making 2. And I've got a couple ones here to share with you. All right, Pattern Making 2. That's interesting. The picture didn't come through. But you all know for your attendance credit, you're getting your 10 points for being here tonight. And then I know I don't have the link just live yet in the forum discussion, but I will tomorrow. Okay, I'm coming up with a discussion there. Your textbook, of course, is the ebook, Pattern Making. This week isn't super heavy on the activities, so hopefully we can get you all caught up and wrapping up here by the end of the course. The strapless foundation is the last of the foundations to develop. It does come back into using the contouring of what you did in the first week, but we are eliminating the top part of the bodice of the front and back. And the strapless foundation is, if a company is going to be doing, let's say mostly, like bridesmaids and wedding dresses and special occasion dresses, that typically will have these strapless options, or maybe even a spaghetti strap, a really thin strap that's so thin it's not really supporting the garment. It would still be based off of this sloper. And so rather than start from the full sloper and come to this to then make their design, they'll just start with foundation pieces already developed at the basics. Now the one you're doing will just go right to the waistline, but the book does show other options that extend through the waist and down into the hip area. The other thing I just want to point out with strapless garments, and this kind of falls into your construction side, which isn't necessarily anything we're doing as far as an exercise or activity this week, but I like to point out that in strapless garments, because nothing is holding them up, they are usually incorporated or built with some kind of support systems in the way of something stiff along seam lines. And they can do that. You'll see them stitched onto seam allowances. You'll see them stitched maybe as like a little casing channel right next to a seam that the pieces can be slid up into. Those stiff pieces, they're called boning, B-O-N-I-N-G. And it's left over from back when they actually would use whalebone. Whalebone, they could splinter off into thin pieces, and it could be rigid yet flexible to be used in garments, in corsets, to help hold them up. But since then, nowadays, we use anything from very thin metals that again are rigid but yet do allow some flexibility so you can move. Plastics are another one. Some of them will come already encased in a little bit of cloth, so all you have to do is stitch down on either side of the cloth, or they may be a thin enough plastic that you can actually sew with your machine right through it. So different variations there. But you can see inside this wedding dress here that there is some structure. It's on all the different seams. They also put a ribbon right around the waist area. Again, that kind of secures the garment right at the waist, and then it stands up because of that boning through there. And it will have like a hook and eye or a snap wherever the zipper is to close that strap. And the strap is only like attached at a couple spots, maybe like center front and the side seams, and then close to center back. Many times they're just kind of held like through little, what looks like little belt loops. But that too kind of helps keep the dress grounded to a position on the body. And then our strapless foundation. This week, all you have to do is develop the foundation pieces. You do not have to create a design from them. I think everybody has a pretty good idea of what a strapless garment may be. This one here, the red dress, is represented by this foundation here. As far as this is the center front section, and it's dipping down at center front to make this sweetheart type neckline. But some of them might be developed from the top point here where it sews to the side seam straight across to the folded edge, and those would be tops that would go straight across here. Those are really the only two options other than extending it further. But they are pictured through your textbook. I know that I don't have a video for this. I think the textbook offers some pretty good descriptive steps. If I can squeeze it in tomorrow afternoon, although I do have other live lectures tomorrow, if I can get one taped, then I could probably have it edited and up by Friday morning. I'm going to try to do that, but in the case I don't, I do believe the book offers some pretty good instruction, and I think, you know, you guys can should start to begin to feel comfortable kind of following the book instructions, and not always depending on a demonstration from me, because the book offers so many other options of designs that we are just not going to get to. In fact, I've had this textbook since my college days, and I still haven't done every design in there. So, you know, I want you comfortable with doing those. All right, the other major topic this week and activity is a knockoff pattern. And a knockoff is a term used when you take a pattern from a pre-existing garment. You are going to knock it off somebody else's work. And the video that's in the lesson, and this one's just like a little 2-minute one I'll play here, gives you some of the visualization of what those steps may be in order to do that. And we're just going to keep a simple option here. The garment that I want you to pick to knock off is something from your own wardrobe. So it's going to be made to whatever you decide and it fits you. And I'm only looking for 3 pieces: a front, a back, and a shoulder, or a sleeve. Or maybe it's sleeveless, but maybe it's got a collar or something, but 3 pieces to it. So keep that in mind. That's the number of pieces I need. The knockoffs can be done one of 2 ways. You can actually unstitch or take apart a garment at all the sewn seams. The only problem is if it's one of your favorites and most people like a knockoff of something that fits them really well, they don't want to go messing it up, nor do they want to create the more work of having to actually sew it back together. But that is one way to do it, maybe for a complicated design, or maybe something that's old and, you know, getting worn out or faded, so you're not concerned about actually keeping it. Then you might want to deconstruct it. But the other option, though, is to knock it off without taking it apart. And if you keep it pretty simple, like a basic kind of t-shirt sort of shape, the front, a back, and a sleeve, then, you know, start simple and slowly you can work your way up. And I do this all the time with clients that come and say, I love this dress. I want to get 5 more in different colors, make a pattern from it. And so that's what I'll start with. This video, I'm just going to play. It runs about just a minute or 2, minute and a half. Gives you a little sampling. So here she takes and folds the garment in half. And if you pin on the fold and some of the edges matching up like the side seams, if they're pinned together, then it stays nice and folded. With her pattern paper here, she'll strike 1 long line for laying one of the folded edges on, so that then keeping that very straight, she can see the angle or the curve of a side seam or the hem around the bottom. Now remember, they're doing a super fast kind of version here, and she just kind of traces it out. You're getting a general idea of the shape here, that's all. I do recommend, though, to be very careful. She is using a felt tip marker. I do like to use pencil, and I'd be very careful I don't leave any marks on my garment. So if you're using a felt tip pen, you run the risk of making a mark. And then there she's using her curves to kind of match in some of the curves for the arm and the neck. You know, I can't say it's the most precise pattern, but it's going to give you a pretty good general idea. And then there she says you do the same thing for the front and the back, and of course you would do some sleeves also. And then the last thing I'm going to address here is the pattern card. Some of you have had the class before where we practice filling one in. Maybe you haven't, so I wanted to touch base on that. But I don't have an example in the slideshow, so I'm going to take you over to a card here in my documents in just a moment. Don't forget your discussion and the quiz for the week. So let me exit this slideshow. And all right, now I just got to get my document opened for the pattern card. There we go. Oh, this one not, I'm waiting for a picture to load in this one. Maybe it didn't. Here we go. Okay. Thanks for being patient. Let me get this other shared screen up. All right, are you all seeing it's like a Google Doc here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so when you do your knockoff activity, you know, you're gonna do the 3 pieces, like a front, a back, and a sleeve. I want you to practice filling in a pattern card. These are something that should accompany all patterns, just so that you have an idea of what pattern pieces you expect to be in there. And like I said, some of your activities, if you've had some of the other classes, we've addressed it. But if you hadn't yet, here's your first introduction. One of the fields is a style number. Since we don't have a numbering system, you just pick whatever number you want. As you make more and more patterns, you may come up with your own kind of style identifying numbers, maybe incorporate a date or something in there. The size, your sloper that you make anything off of would be a size 8, but if you're doing a knockoff piece, maybe if it's a t-shirt, it might be a medium or a large or a small. Just jot down what size that is. Yardage is an estimation of how many yards of fabric. That way, if you did want to try and remake that garment, you have an idea of how much fabric you'd need. And then date, you can put the month and the year. Description is using your terminology, your words, to create the picture. In case for some reason you couldn't see a picture of it, you go back to that. Now the self section, that is a listing of the different pattern pieces for the main fabric, the outside fabric. If any of the pieces required interfacing, those go in the fusing section, meaning that you would also cut the interfacing for it. So like when you guys did the dress in your basic construction, you had the main front, the main back, but then you had the neck facing. You had to cut it out of fabric, so it would have been listed under self, and you would have cut it out of fusing as well. The numbers here on the left-hand column is referring to the number of pieces you cut in fabric, not the paper patterns, but the number in fabric. And then lining, if the design required lining. For your knockoff pattern, most likely you wouldn't have that. I wouldn't want you trying to knock off a pattern from something that's got that complicated. Just like I said, keep that simple. So you would probably just have a t-shirt front, t-shirt back, and a sleeve. The last section here is some sewing indicators. If there's a zipper, you would write that down. Snaps, in this case, the quantity of snaps, what size you made the seam allowance, any other kind of a sewing instructions you might have. So this just happened to be an example here. All right, so in the activity for the knockoff will be a link for the pattern card. They're blank ones. You can fill them in for that, but that would be part of that example. Okay. One last thing I just kind of wanted to share here too, because I think you both had the from week 2, right? The last of the activities there, which was the like the plan for making the pattern, but you didn't actually have to make the pattern, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been working on trying to come up with some examples for you. So what that activity was based on is this. You did a sketch, one that would be a design that would use a stretch knit sloper, and then one sketch was using the torso sloper. So that was the sketches of design. Then there was the design activity, where we're not actually making the pattern, we're planning it out. So you took one of those sketches, and here is an example of the stretch knit. The sketch and description of that dress. So here it's based on the stretch knit sloper. It has princess style lines, an empire style line, pockets on the seam, an A-line, little flare to the skirt, and a cowl neck. So that way I kind of broke it down into components. Another part then that helps from going from kind of the idea to really being able to plan out what's going to happen pattern-wise is your technical line drawings. And so you do not have to color them in. They can be, left white. I encourage you to use Illustrator, but if you feel more comfortable doing it by hand, as long as they're nice and neat and representing, seam lines. Seam lines, if you do dotted lines to show some top stitching. So here were my princess seam lines, my style line that cuts it off kind of like an empire line, some top stitching showing where the pockets would be, and my cowl neck. So 10 points are for that technical line drawing, whether it's done by hand or in Illustrator. And then the third part of the assignment is writing out some steps to making those patterns. I want to see your thought process. Are you thinking through it from, first of all, which sloper are you going to use? Well, if I'm using stretch knit fabric and design, I want to use my stretch knit sloper. I would trace them off, the front and the back and the sleeves. I widened the scoop curve of my neckline, adjusting the front and the back on the shoulders to match. So if I moved my neckline out on a shoulder on my front, I need to make sure I do it to the back. I did style lines for the princess line. Plot, that's another word for draw. Plot it from the shoulder through the bust point and down through here. A style line for the empire, a horizontal style line. Separate patterns on style lines. Plot slash lines on the lower skirt for front and back to spread them open, slash and spread for my one-sided added fullness at the hem. Okay, so I'm using some of my terminology: dart manipulation, style lines, added fullness. I decided, let's see, draft pockets for an inseam pocket, make notches where those go. I said lengthen my sleeves, plot a style line on the back half of the sleeve, separate. Then I addressed the collar, measure the neckline, draft the cowl. Yes, I want to go look in my textbook maybe to see step by step what I do. In this, plan though, I know then you addressed thinking about, okay, I put it in color on here. Here in the book is where I can go find that. Does that make sense? I probably should have put my page numbers. But and until you actually sat down and did this, you probably would catch, oh, I missed a step, or oh, there's 1 or 2 steps. But if I know you thought about the front, the skirt, the back, the sleeve, the finishing collar treatment, how are you going to hem it, things like that, then I feel better that you're on the right track, and we've got you thinking in those, along those lines. And that's where this class I want you to be able to go with. Do you have any questions about that? Or are you understanding what this activity is asking for better now?
Yeah, a little bit better now that you give us an example.
Okay.
I was trying to do it today and couldn't figure it out, so I'm glad you showed it to us.
Yeah. Well, I got this done, and then I realized I saved it in the wrong format, so I couldn't put the pictures in there. I thought, well, I'll get to talk to them tonight. But I will save these as a format that I can actually put on that lesson page, so you can reference back to it as well.
Okay.
All right. Then I think that brings me to a close for what we've got this week, unless you have any other questions on that.
Mm-mm.
Nope. Okay. All right. Tina, you good?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I have a question. It's nothing discussed this week.
All right. Question outside of class. All right. Then I will stop recording because I don't think we need that.